What up? What up? It's the man Sean P coming in live. This is the Sean P Experience on YouTube. Don't forget it. We're on YouTube, and I have another wonderful show lined up for you guys. I cannot wait. It's been like months in the making. A lot of anticipation, a lot of conversation, and now we're finally here to make it manifest. I have the author extraordinaire, Tracie Angela Greene. How you doing, my sister?
I am doing very well this afternoon. I'm really happy to be here to be a part of the Sean P experience, speaking with a griot.
Hey,
Hey,
I tried, I tried. And speaking of griot, so this show is titled "Sitting with the Griot," the
okay,
storyteller,
that's right,
old
that's right.
tradition, right? And your book is all about tradition. Your book is all about paying homage to the old ways. How do you feel about being called a modern griot, or for the females, griots? How you feel about that?
It feels good because that is what I am. I am a storyteller. I always have been since childhood, and so it feels natural. It feels good, and it is the way that our culture passes on information. Throughout the decades, throughout the centuries, we tell stories.
So I love to ask my guests when it comes to that title. Whenever you sit down and think about that and what that means, do you feel any kind of weight, any kind of pressure when it comes to that, or do you not even think about it? You do it in your process.
No, I don't really feel any kind of pressure because it's my gift. And when it's all said and done, really, it's what God is creating through you. And so it feels right. It feels good because it has all of that amazement behind it. So, I'm just a vessel. When it's all said and done, I'm just a vessel. I'm here to tell these stories. I'm a vessel.
Now you mentioned your childhood,
Right.
and in your author bio, I want
Okay.
to take a little time and simmer on this for a little bit
Okay.
because this is emphasize enough. You mentioned in your childhood you was a little girl early, writing things and putting things out there. Tell the audience a little bit about like they say it takes 10,000 hours to master a craft. You have amassed 10,000 hours a long time ago. So tell them about that.
So funny that you say that. My brother was just talking to me about that yesterday. But I've been writing, since I was about 6 years old when I wrote my first story that was published for the school library. And I think that my teacher, saw that I had a knack for not only writing stories, but when I read the story, I read it with much enthusiasm. And I was hooked. After that, at that point, I was hooked. I was always ready to write and do the creative writing assignments as a child, and not just creative writing. I like writing, period. I like language. I liked language arts growing up. I like writing nonfiction. So, I like writing. And so, even going forward, I think I mentioned in my bio that I entered the Ebony Junior Writing Contest. And I bring it up now because Ebony Junior isn't around anymore. So I think it's good to mention that was a part of my experience growing up. That was a phenomenal magazine that Ebony put out for the youth. Do you remember it?
Well, I never experienced it
You
personally
never experienced.
around where I am, but I do want to highlight, emphasize the power of Ebony at
Mm,
that time. And some of the authors I've had on the show, they've been a part of, New York Times, Washington Post, etc. But
hmm.
most of them say to their family, whenever they were finally in Ebony or Essence, some of
Hmm.
our publishers, that's
Yes,
never really hit. Like wow, like I made it, like I did it.
exactly.
That was a real crescendo for them.
Exactly. And I still feel, that's the way I feel about Ebony and Essence. Both Ebony and Essence played were major in my life growing up, giving me that culture, giving me those role models, for us, for our people, for African Americans in the forefront and in a phenomenal way. You felt really proud. Did you see in my autobiography? We're going to ask this later on, but did you see that part about that came up when I was flipping through the Ebony magazines when in
Yes,
college?
that was coming up. That
I'll
was
wait.
coming up.
I'll wait for you then.
I'm gonna set you up. I'm gonna set
Yeah,
you up.
okay. But yeah,
I
Ebony.
want to just speak a little bit more about I've been the past 5 or more years studying Black press. I
Right.
love reading about old school press. And I was
Okay.
telling Dr. Imani Perry last week when we talked on her show
Yes.
uh, about like most of our major movements had press. Marcus Garvey movement had their own papers. The Black
Yep.
Panther Party with the Panther papers. Nation of Islam still to this day. Final
Yep.
Call. I still get the Final Call newspaper. So like to have our stories from our people, our perspectives, we always saw how important that was to have our own stories, right?
Yes. We have to tell our own stories. Nobody can tell our stories like us. We are the only ones that can tell our authentic stories. We are the only ones.
Now you did mention you said you was this a younger girl flipping around and you happened upon you stumbled upon your father in Ebony, correct?
In Ebony
So tell me
Magazine.
how did that even happen? I mean,
It was pretty mystical, quite frankly. I was in college. I went to Pratt Institute University in Brooklyn, New York. And so I did work study in the library, which was over 100 years old, oldest library in Brooklyn. And there was this section in the library called the stacks, and the bookshelves were made out of Tiffany glass. And so, I used to hide out in the stacks and flip through all the old ebony magazines. I love looking through the old ebony magazines from the 60s, the early 70s, two of my late 60s, early 70s. That is like, those are my favorite eras. That era is my favorite era. And so I'm flipping through one of the magazines, and lo and behold, I don't come upon this picture of my father um, at Morehouse College. They were doing an article. The article was about the swim team, and my father was the captain of the swim team, the Maroon Tigers, the Morehouse Tigers. That was their swim team. They had a phenomenal swim team back then. And then there were pictures, and
that's crazy.
my uncles were on the team. And so my dad didn't even know this article existed. And I'm telling my age now, and that was in the 80s when I found the article. So it was pretty magical. It was mystical.
So you mentioned your father. You said your uncle too, right? Your father, your uncle. You mentioned early educator in your earlier writing stage. What did that kind of upbringing do for you as a writer, as a creative? What did that do for you to empower you?
It empowered me to really want to capture, I love sci-fi fantasy. I love fantasy realism. I love that. But I wanted to make sure I included in my story, I wanted to capture the African American family, um, the a different side of our families that we don't hear about as much. Um, you know, the middle class African American family, and how our families come together. Like, we have blood relatives and we have love relatives. You have relatives that come in your family. You don't know how they come in the family next, but you call them aunt, you call them cousin. But they may not be a blood relative, but they're certainly a love relative. And so, like, when you hear me speaking about my uncles, it could be either or. Um, and it doesn't make a difference. Like, once that's established, we really don't go digging back into the history of the person, how they came into the family. We don't like go digging back like, oh yeah, well, that's really so and so's best friend from so that once they're in the family, that's it. That is it. And so I wanted to show that in my story for sure, because that in itself has a fantastical element to it. My thing is that, I write fantasy, but what's fantasy and fantastical for us may not be fantastical for another culture.
Mhm. It's funny you mentioned that because my mom and I have been about 5 or 6 years digging into our family history,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
ancestry, all those things. But you're right, like you realize the conversation, like, oh, so that wasn't their real, that wasn't their mom, but that person raised them. That wasn't
Right.
that person. You realize that, scientifically, but it don't matter to us.
Scientifically, that's an excellent
It
way of
doesn't
putting
matter
it.
to us. That's
Scientific,
family. That's blood, right?
right. But it doesn't
Yeah,
matter to us.
it doesn't matter.
It
No.
doesn't matter to our family. Once we establish who family is, that's that. And I saw that. I actually listened to that experience you had with, I can't remember the author's name, but she deep dived, and that was her thing. studying our ancestry. That was an excellent podcast. I really enjoyed that.
Oh my God, yes, Miss Anders, and she has a phenomenal business with genealogy, and that was a fun show to do.
Yes,
Talking about DNA and science and the breakdowns, and once again, look,
make sure you want to know. Make sure you want to know.
That's a part of your book. That's a part of your thing.
Yeah.
We'll get into that pretty soon. We'll get into that, right? So, let me ask you. So, your book, very unique title, very unique character names. Tell us about this title and the character names and what's behind it. I know everything means something, right?
So the name of the book is Enisi, the Bleu Realm. Enisi, the Bleu Realm, and it is the first in a trilogy. So, Enisi, this is the first in a trilogy. I'm working on the second novel right now. Plan to have it out this summer. It may be at the end of the summer or midsummer, but the goal is for you guys to
come back. You got to come back. I'm inviting you right now. You got to come back.
Let's go. Okay, we'll get that on the schedule. But Enisi is a Cherokee word. It's a Cherokee word, and Enisi can mean grandfather and grandmother. On the paternal side of the family, it can mean grandfather and grandmother, and usually on the maternal side of the family, it means grandmother. So Enisi is from the paternal line of this family, and so it means grandfather in Cherokee. And the Bleu Realm, Bleu, B-L-E-U, that is the family. That's Enisi's human family. And so, the focus of the story, the Blues and Enisi. And go ahead.
So for those that just tuning in, they're just seeing it for this the wet their palate. Could you give them like a little synopsis or elevator pitch for the book to get kind of whet their appetite?
Yeah, sure can. So the elevator pitch is real short. It's a true elevator pitch. There's a young woman, and her mentor is this tree-like, highly intelligent being who loves to meddle in the genetics of others. And she's cool with that until she finds out who the others are. And so, that should hopefully get you okay, what's going on here? And then if you want to go a little further, it follows the Blue family. The story follows the Blue family all the way from the 1800s to the 1980s. And it's their life with their phenomenal tree-like being Enisi, and all the highs and lows that go along with that, and the phenomenal impact that he has on the family. He is a member of the family. This family tree is a member of the family.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
He's a living ancestor because he's been around since the ancestors.
You mentioned this tree and Enisi being a Cherokee rooted word or stuff like that.
Yes.
Your book. I want to highlight this too. Your book has an actual glossary in the back, breaking down these terms and words. Tell us the importance of the glossary in the book. See, I love highlighting all the parts of the book.
I love
Not just the main matter. I love all of it. So tell us why the glossary.
And I certainly appreciate that. So the glossary came about because in my critique group, which I was the only African American in the critique group, they were like, maybe you should do a glossary. And so I decided to do a glossary, and it's helpful. Like a lot of my readers are like, we don't necessarily need glossaries. We like to kind of figure out the word for itself, and we're not going to flip back to it. But the glossary is quite helpful. I had a lovely meeting with a book club. And so they were like, I looked up such and such words. I was like, oh, that was in the glossary. You could have found that in the glossary. And they were like, oh, right, the glossary. So I just wanted people to be able to not have to linger and try to figure out the word as they're reading, and just know that in the back of the book, there's a glossary. And if you forget something means, just flip back there. You can see the word right back there. You'll find it.
Let me tell you my reading experience, right? And we all different. I'm not saying this across the book, but for me, I love to break down words and etymology and understand what I'm reading to make me enjoy the book.
Yeah.
So there's another book that I read last year,
okay.
and the book was amazing as far as the story. But there were so many names and words I couldn't get. So now I'm being pulled from the story, trying to figure out what we're talking about. What is this? And I couldn't really get it. But if there would have been a glossary, it'll give me that much more acceleration to enjoy the story. So I love that you had a glossary with it.
Yeah, and it was kind of helpful for me too as well because my book is written from multiple point of views. And so when you're talking about traditional publishing industry, nowadays, it wasn't always, that's kind of like shunned upon. Like they want one or two point of views, and they usually want them very much specified and spelled out as where one chapter is one point of view, another chapter is another point of view, and you go through the book like that. But it really wasn't comfortable for me writing like that. I wanted to write all my point of views together because it's a family, and in a family, you're going to have everybody's point of view right there at the table, at the kitchen table, when they're talking or when they're doing things together. So the glossary kind of helped me to be able to do that successfully, so that, and hopefully help my reader have a successful and, intriguing, fun read while experiencing the novel.
That's right. I want to back up a little bit to the about the author, right? I've
Yeah.
never asked any other guest this. I want to ask you first.
Okay.
Because people always skip the about the author's note, the bio. They skip that stuff, the acknowledgments, right? So you write the whole manuscript, and they say, all right, we need your bio, we need your about the author. What is your thought process whenever you're doing that as an artist? Because I think if viewers understand how you feel when you're writing it, they'll value it a little bit more.
So what was my experience in writing the bio? Is that what you're asking? Okay, so for me, writing the bio, that was really important because I wanted the readers to just get a sense of what inspired the novel. And so I gave a little bit about myself since I've been writing since I was a child. So of course I did that. But then a lot of the autobiography is about the influences of the story from my actual life. And so that was really, really helpful because when you have to have interviews and you're on podcasts, all of that really helps you to be able to answer questions more fully and just give a better experience for yourself, the interviewer, and the reader. So, that's kind of what I was thinking about when I was writing my autobiography.
I love you saying that verbally because as a host, people don't realize I found some of my best questions for the show. It didn't come from the book itself. They might have said one thing they mentioned in the acknowledgement or one thing they mentioned in the bio. And I'm like, tell me a little bit more right here. Tell me a little bit more where it came from.
Exactly.
The person might say something that they never really have said before on camera, but I haven't asked the question. So those parts of the book is vital. It helped me enjoy the book even much more, to be honest.
My neighborhood paper that's been around for a very long time, the South Fulton Neighbor, here in College Park, Georgia. I mean, the questions that she was able to pull out from the bio just made me think of things in a different way. And it actually helped me to write a really great artistic statement because of the questions she pulled from the bio that led me to think and dig a little deeper into my thought process. And that was just so helpful.
I could have done a full interview on your bio alone. My last guest I had last week, same thing with her publication. I could have done a full interview on y'all. Yeah, I got notes in y'all bio. I got tabs and highlights in the bio alone. So I love whenever artists take the time and really flesh it out. Go do some little generic little things. Really put their heart and your family all over the bio, all over there.
Exactly.
I hope they really, really appreciate that whenever they saw it.
Yeah, I mean, because they are the basis of the Blue family in the novel. That family, it's not word for word. It's not, it's, the book is fiction, but they are the influence of the energy behind that family. And not just my family, just a lot of African-American families, my friends' families, my cousins' families. This is how we roll. When you read that, you're getting a sense of, the energy behind our families, where we were coming from, the happiness, the joy.
Yes.
That's one of the key things that I wanted to bring in this novel is that I really wanted to express the joy that we have in the African American family, the reason why we can be so strong and get through so much. We have a lot of joy in our families. And so
You're right. Your book is very much about the family, and it was very much about their bond to each other and their togetherness, and it was the dinner table banter and things that we all kind of, these days so different, society is different. Not many folks sit together at the family and eat together. Not many
right.
folks, even for the holiday, people get their little plate and go somewhere else in the house and watch their little phone. Not many folks come together and just sit. We gonna talk and catch up with one another. So it is good to see that in the book.
And for me, that's like one of the things that I was like, okay, to me, that can be a fantastical element, especially since nowadays we don't have it that, you don't see it as much, or people don't talk about it as much. And so that can be something that someone strives to have. Like, I want my family to be like the family in Enisi, the Bleu Realm. I want them to be like the Blues. I like the energy, I like that vibe that family had. That can be something to someone else who does not have that. That can be a fantastical moment.
It is, man. It's magical because think about it. Like I grew up, my great grandmother was still alive. My great grandfather still alive. I can remember holidays when I was a little boy, and all of us generations of family. See, the last book I did, the Black Candle Women, you have multi generations in the household. My household was like that. You have my grandparents, my mom, my aunt, me, my little cousins, and then now the baby's coming. You have generations of us. That's what we know. All of us together celebrating each other, uplifting. That's how we are. But for a lot of people, that's not their story. So they can just read that and be like, man, I wonder what it's like. Your grandmother's always there? Not just for the holidays? You mean she's always?
Yes, exactly. Those are some, that's like one of the things that, runs through my novel. Culture, our music, our dance, all of these things. And then to me, a very fantastical element is the romantic love between family members, between man and woman. In this particular novel, Man and Woman, that's where the romance is centered around heterosexual romance. But it's beautiful, it's strong. So to see that, especially when people are striving so hard to have strong relationships, in this novel you have that. You see this beautiful strong relationship, and it can seem quite fantastical, especially if you haven't grown up around that. You're not seeing it on TV, but here I am presenting it to you here in this novel. This is something to strive for. This is something to bring into your reality.
I want to bring something else to reality, talking about family and things of that nature. Another important part of your book, and I love another author doing this lately, the family tree. About family. The literal family tree, the lineage in the book. The Love Songs of Du Bois, Honoré Jefferson. I love she did that. There's a few other books that I've read, the actual family trees in the book. Tell us the importance of having a visual family tree in the publication.
Yes, if people take the time to look at the family tree, it's very important because, this is about a family, so there are going to be a lot of family names that get mentioned, even if it gets mentioned once or twice. So you really get to see from this family tree who the main character is. You see the ancestry. One of the cool things about the Blues is they know their ancestry all the way back to the 1800s. So how we're always talking about, I'm growing up, for me, there's always somebody saying, y'all know we got Indian in our blood. We got Indian in our family. Not my family, my friend's family. This is often comes out at some point in a conversation at the family reunion, at Thanksgiving or something, at Christmas dinner. And so I wanted to make sure I wanted to make sure that it was crystal clear the Native American, the indigenous people heritage in the Blue family, exactly where it came from. And so the book starts there. So yes, they do have Cherokee in their family, and they know how, they know when it started. They know their Cherokee ancestry, they know their European ancestry, and they know their African ancestry, which that's a fantastical moment for African Americans.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. So let's dig a little bit more right here, right? Let's take it right here a little bit. I love to ask about the research process, even in fictional books. I want to know the research process. Who did you have to go and gather, and how did you do that? Probably conversations, interviews, maybe to make this book. What was that process?
So, when I first started writing this novel, it was a completely different story. But I got so enthralled with the backstory that it became the front story. And I don't know, like I had seen some documentaries on the Trail of Tears. And that is when the Cherokee and other indigenous tribes were forced to go west to leave their land on the southeast coast from the Appalachian Mountains, from Georgia, from Florida, and forced to go to Oklahoma. And that was called the Trail of Tears. It happened in the early to mid 1800s. And so I decided to bring that into this novel. I had seen documentaries on it. I had visited. And so as I became more and more interested in it, I like to go to Asheville, North Carolina. It's one of my favorite places to visit. They have a strong Cherokee heritage there that they honor. And so, and near Asheville is actually Cherokee, North Carolina, a city that is a Cherokee indigenous people city, because some of the Native Americans did go to Oklahoma, but others stayed behind, hid in the woods. And so there's a Cherokee band still in North Carolina as well as in Oklahoma. And so in my novel, I was mixing it up. At first, when I was doing my research, I was mixing it up. And then I said, hold up, I got to go back in here, because even though it's a fantasy, some things you want to make sure that's on point, especially for me with the history. I had to go back, kind of untangle words and things, and make sure that I was speaking of the Cherokee of North Carolina, or the Appalachian Mountains.
Yes, ma'am. You mentioned some of them didn't go. You spoke my mind right there, and they hid in the woods. Is that still called a maroon? I know for our tradition, the ones that was in the slavery, they be in the woods or the outskirts. They call them the maroons. Are there still like maroons?
I don't know, like
conceptually.
Conceptually, because in my research, of course, they weren't called the maroons. They were just like, these are when I went to Cherokee and visited the museum and everything. They just were like, some of the Cherokees, they moved on into the woods. But it's kind of that same, that same energy, that same philosophy, that same reasoning as to what we did as enslaved people, which leads me to so Sioux is the Cherokee ancestor in the novel, and then the African ancestor is Ife.
Yes.
Ife escaped through the woods.
Right.
She escaped from the coast up into the mountains. With the woods helping her, she escaped through the woods. Yes. She remembers and knows how she came over. She was she was Yoruba back in Africa, on the continent of Africa, from a made-up country called Yoruba. That's a country that I made up. Just because there's so much to the Yoruba culture that I really didn't want to fumble around and make too many mistakes. So I made that part completely. Where she came from, Yoruba, is fantastical. But she is of that true, real people and culture. And so that's that African heritage. So, now in my novel, Sue, the Cherokee, her family did go to Oklahoma, but because she was married to a white man, he said he wasn't going to Oklahoma. And so you'll find out why they left. This is at the beginning of the book. But, so you have that as well. And the part that is true is that the government told the Cherokee that they were going to be buying their land from them, and as they forced them west. But of course, they paid them barely anything. And in my novel, it comes out that Sue's husband got paid a lot of money because he was white, but actually the land was not his. He came to everything that he had. He came from his Cherokee wife. In the Cherokee tradition is that the women get the land and they pass it down. So through their daughters.
I love it.
So that's kind of some really cool, true heritage that's in the novel, which is a strong base to build a phenomenal fantasy.
Yes, and we need more conversations about our relations to the Native American family and vice versa. There's not enough said about that. And I'm glad you brought this out in the book. To make a person with historical fiction, I love it because
it's historical
a person should go and look at what's the reality in this.
Yes.
It's fantastic and all that. Because every fictional story has that real underbelly that is based on it.
Yes.
Everything came from somewhere. Everything came from something. So to go and deep dive on your own and look at those Native American roots and all that. You talk about the Appalachian Mountains.
Yeah.
The book called South to America, talking about the Appalachian Mountains and things like that. We got to get more into that, man. We got to dig more into those tales and stories.
Yes, I totally agree. Agree.
Yeah. So tell me this: what was your spark, your creative spark? You've been writing for a long time. What made you say, you know what, I'm gonna write this story? I'm gonna do the homework. I'm gonna do the research. I'm gonna travel. Why this story?
I think what really began to, like I said, I started off writing one story, but I'm a gardener. I garden, and so when I really sat down, I had some time off from work when I decided, okay, let me start my novel. Let me find, because I always knew I was writing a novel. Like I always knew I was going to be, a novelist. Life happens, you get out in the real world, you live life, but no problem, because all of that helps you to be able to have really good experiences that you write about and that you can pull from your fiction when you actually live some life. So, but I was gardening big time. And I had started gardening when I lived at my mom's house, at my parents' house. I used to do just gardening in pots. And then when I moved to my house, I was out in the ground, in that soil, and just really getting into the vibe of the plants, the mysticism of how a tiny little seed could grow into a tree to produce millions of seeds. It's just like, it's such a fantastic, grand example of God in action. I mean, God don't do little, but God does easy. And when you see how, dang, this just happens like this, wow, we do so much as humans to make things occur. When you go out in nature, it's so easy flowing, And so I just really got involved in that, just let myself really feel it. And at the time, I had just had surgery and I was healing. And being out in my garden and in that dirt and planting seeds and, just being in grass and observing different kind of plants and what we call weeds, what I call wildflowers, it healed me. It healed me. I began to heal in a very easy, natural way. I began to heal. So
let's dig into that more. Let's dig into that because your book is real big on plants. You go into a lot of detail, vividly plants and herbs and the healing, and a lot going on with that. Give them more of that.
Because that is where, like, if you want fantasy, if you want the fantastical in your life, go out in the woods. Start doing nature walks. Okay, and just start looking at all the, I know I'm saying this word a lot, phenomenal, but it's a word that it's the correct word to use. You want to go out and see some, phenomenal things occur, and start walking in the woods. Go at different times during the year, fall, winter, spring, summer. Looking at the tree, you might catch some leaves unfolding. It's just so much to see, the flowers, the fragrance, the colors. It is so mystical. And so, that will cultivate, to me, that cultivates fantastical elements in reality. The grandness of a giant oak tree that's been alive for centuries. Put your arms around that. Go touch that, against that. So, and we were traveling too, and I had been seeing these grand oak trees. And I mean, I'm awed by them. I really am. And so that's this when you know you're a vessel. Next thing I know, I'm writing Enisi as like he's becoming the lead character. the mystical tree is becoming like the lead character. And so then I can go that's when I can just let my imagination go crazy and all that goes on with Enisi, his whole root system and how it expands, grows. That's all fantastical. That all evolved through me. The words, the names, he is a perennia. The words are very similar to real words, but some aren't. And it gets to the point where it's blurred and people are like looking up the word as if it is a word that they're going to find on Planet Kingdom of our world, but it's not. These are the things that just kind of evolve.
That's phenomenal because I guess being here in the South, I'm in Louisiana, by the way.
Oh yeah, Louisiana.
We take these things for granted because you're around it all the time, your whole entire life.
Yeah.
My friends come down from Chicago and New York, other places where it's more concrete, and they're just driving down the road, they're just mystified. To us it's like, okay, it's trees, but we gotta really, like they say, stop and smell the roses.
Yes.
Like really slow this fast life down and appreciate. It's springtime right now. Things all blue.
Oh my goodness. You've got to allow yourself to be mystified during springtime. You've got to. And see, I grew up when I was young, we lived in Florida. So the front yard was just a patch of grass, the backyard a patch of grass, some bushes, no trees. And when we moved to Atlanta, my parents bought a house on 3 acres of land, mostly woods, in a suburban neighborhood. So I'm living in the woods, got the backyard forest, but can hop on the expressway to the epicenter of Georgia, Atlanta. With the black mare. So this was a very, very, very special period. I didn't think so then, but the older I get and I see where we are now, it was a very special time to grow up in, especially, in Atlanta, south of Atlanta. But I grew up with those woods all around me, playing in those woods, and I was not afraid to play in the woods, although I had no woods that I played in before I moved to Georgia. I had no fear. It was a natural thing.
So many generations today don't know what it's like to play in the woods. Like I told my friends a couple of days ago, when your parents just said something simple like, y'all go play. Go play.
Go play.
Man, it's a loaded sentence. Go play. We in Louisiana, once again, we play hide and seek in the sugarcane field. If you have the experience running through the sugarcane and getting the bathtub that night, you put a little small micro cuts from the blades, you didn't feel it in real time when you playing.
Right.
You get that bathtub like, oh. But these kids are so inside with the games and devices, they will never know what it's like to really go out there, get bit, get stung by a wasp, get bit by a fire ant.
All that has happened. Now you have no fear of these kind of things as you get older. All that's happened when you when your mom and them told you go play.
Go play. Y'all go play.
Your parents, you had the freedom to go play. Your parents encouraging you go play.
The conversation was based around like how expensive it is these days to entertain your child. They need so many devices and stimulation because they always say, I'm bored. We had minimal things, but we created so much. The imagination was so vast. We didn't need much to go out there and make up all types of things.
My brother and I had the biggest imaginations on the planet. We went out in we played in our backyard, in our woods, in our house, wherever we had imagination on 1,000. Barbie and G.I. Joe, please. We took them to a whole nother level. So yeah. So that's the book evolved around all that, the magic of the forest, the mystical energy of the forest, the vibe of the forest, that really channeled through me.
Yeah. So talk about this too, right? Because I was telling you in private yesterday, we'll talk about it now on air. I was studying a book about ancient African history, and even on the hieroglyphs in ancient Egypt, there was always a connection to the trees and culture and plants. Even like looking down on some of their tribes, they had their huts made a certain way it looked like a tree or something. That was always intertwined in our culture. The trees, understand their importance, and we're so spiritually connected, right? So talk about that spiritual connection of Enisi and some of these other plant life. And people are called tree huggers, right? These days, they got tree huggers. Or you go outside barefoot, they call it grounding. All these concepts were always in our culture.
Grounding. So that's so funny to me, because when we lived in Florida, we ran the neighborhoods, we ran the streets barefoot all day long. Came home when we were at my grandma's house. Now, my grandmother did have in Florida. My grandmother had one tree in her backyard, and she had several trees, but she had one tree that we climbed. So we climbed that tree. When I went back older, it wasn't a big tree, but to us at 6 and 5 years old, it was a big tree. We climbed that tree. So we were in this tree, like this tree was our whole world. That was like one of our favorite things to do when she said, go play. And we were always barefoot. You know,
Come on,
we were often barefoot. So
we playing football in the street barefoot. We run the track and field. Look, to a point, we wear actual cleats playing the sport. You feel funny. You played so much barefoot. The shoes was like throwing you off.
You played a lot
barefoot. I don't think about that when it comes to our old school Negro League baseball players and the old school guys. They had minimal equipment, and they were so amazing.
And we are amazing, and that's why and how we are so amazing. How we can make it happen, But the spirituality of the novel of Enisi the Bleu Realm is that Enisi is this highly intelligent being, highly intelligent species. His kind are, but he's spiritual. There's a part in the novel where Enisi is talking about, yes, of course, I believe in the great creator, meaning God. In Cherokee, one of the words that means God, it means great spirit or great creator. So Enisi refers to God as like great spirit or great creator. I can't remember which term I use in the book. But Enisi is like, I'm innately connected to God. I don't even have to discuss or talk about that. It's not even discussion. Do I believe in God? What? It's just like, that's a human thing. This whole having to have a discussion about it, it's an innate thing. It's an innate knowing within me. This is a knowingness within me.
But you know what? That's beyond the dogma of religion. That's dogma. All these little things, the little ritual, it's Lent and it's this and it's that. The spirituality was so intertwined, it was a no-brainer. It's not even a conversation.
Right.
We giving honor to the water and the sun, and people always had the misconception of what they were doing was that they know for a fact we need the sun. If the sun don't come up, we done. So of course, every time the sun come up, we give it honor and thanks to the sun and the plant life. Respect the animals.
Yes.
Like that was just like duh,
So that's so. I put that in there because I just want to, I speak about him. He's a highly superior. He says he's constantly saying to his human family, I'm superior. But at the end of the day, he may be superior to them because of his high intelligence that he is and all his powers and gifts that he has. But he knows that there's greater than him.
That's right.
It's a male energy. You notice I refer to Enisi as a male. I did specifically want Enisi to have that yang, that masculine energy, and that was on purpose. That That Enisi is a masculine energy.
We have phenomenal comments in the comment section, as we always do. I appreciate it here on the Sean P Experience. We're talking about understanding the author culture has always been spiritual, but spirituality was deemed primitive, as
Yes.
if primitive is a negative word. And I'm not
Yes.
trying to call our stuff primitive and backwards and everything, but then they take and do a bastardized version of it and call it. Oh, come on, break it down, my sister.
Yes. Yes. So, I mean, she's right. Period. The end. These things that we consider primitive, that we may not consider primitive, but are not primitive, they're actually, it's kind of like at the end of the day, when we make a full circle, that's where we'll be getting right back to the simplicity of it, to the simplicity of that. When you're out in nature and you see, I feel like when you're out in nature, that's when you really see how God gets down. When God makes something flexible, it's really flexible. I mean, the plant, a stem can grow from a crack in a highway. From a crack in a highway, a tree can grow. Okay, so you really just, when you sit back and you step back and you just see how organic, how simplistic, and how that is so incredible. We've gotten so far away from that as humans. And so I do feel and see us coming full circle. We're making a circle back around to it.
Like I told my sister last week on her book discussion, The Black Candle Women, about like voodoo culture, voodoo, the hoodoo, right? I said they demonize those things, but yet they put ashes on their forehead to lit. They have Ash Wednesday. They go to an altar. But if
Yes.
there's an altar in my house, that's supposed to be wrong. But we have an altar. They have altar boys. They like candles. Like these same things are happening in a different way, but you demonize these people.
So many similarities, and don't understand how the similarities were made to be so different. When all these spiritual practices throughout the world, so many similarities in the spiritual practices. At the end of the day, there's so many similarities, and that's something that we as a human race need to really dig deeper into, our similarities and our spiritual similarities, so we can find where we will find common ground, where we will most certainly find common ground in our spiritual similarities.
I want to ask you about this particular character because it's important, right? I believe her name was Kelly,
Keller.
Keller, right?
Yes,
I want to talk about that because the importance at that time, like 1970s, things like that. We know a lot of our ladies haven't been able to have their own bank account. It's been like 50 years, something like that. I read somewhere, right? We know a lot of our ladies couldn't do certain things on their own. So she feel like, you know what, I'm gonna go to school. No matter what y'all saying, I want to go to school. I want to be educated as well to show my children.
Yes.
Not just they could do certain things. Speak about the importance of that character and what she represents for the ladies.
That Keller represents, a very common thing happening in the African American family at the time. As a necessity. The woman had to leave the family to go. Now, Keller didn't have to, but many women did have to leave the family, go get educated, to bring back to the family. So, Keller was just like, Keller had the choice. She didn't have to, but she wanted to. She wanted to get educated. She wanted to learn more. And because she had no issues with it, because she knew that family was going to take care of the child. This, and this is straight from my family. When my mother decided that she was going to back to school, to dental hygiene school, my grandmother picked us up from school every day, got us fed for dinner, and then my mother would come pick us up, and we'd drive back an hour to our house in Pompano. Sometimes we stayed the weekend with grandma. This was so natural. This was not a problem.
That's crazy you said.
My grandmother was like a second mother. I remember one day I was like, oh, grandma, I'm just going to call you mama too. In a happy, joyful way, not in a I'm missing my mother way, because I'm from education. So children, if the love is there, the love, children know when they're being loved and when they're being cared for, and when somebody is really looking out for their well-being. When you have those pieces, children will thrive. And so she didn't have any issues with, Kella felt, she was like, she can come with me, the baby can come with me, when, and be with me at school, because again, we've had Black women who have their children right along with them while they're in school, or she can stay here with her granddaughter, with her family. She can stay here with our family. It's up to the child. She let the 6-year-old make the decision. The 6-year-old said, I'm staying here with Enisi, because her favorite person was Enisi.
So did their own choice. Yep.
So, but to me, I just wanted to bring that to the forefront. I wanted to bring to the forefront. This is, this is how we made it. This is one of the things that we had to do to make it.
It is.
We didn't have the finances. We didn't have all this money being passed down through the family so people could do this. So we had to do the things that we had to do to bring success into our family.
That's right. And back to the family piece, once again, full circle, like, these other folks don't understand on the job. Most times on the job, or even in the military, I experienced this. If you have a death in the family, it got to be your mother, brother, sister, father. The other parts of your family is like, well, that's your cousin or that's your uncle. You don't understand how our family rolls. My aunt is like my mother. Like you said, my grandmother. If I said my grandmother passed, I need these days off. I need this time away, because you can't just, well, that's your grandma. That's not your mama. What you mean?
In the African American family, with so many people, that true sense of it is a village raising that family. Grandma passed away. It's serious. It's a time for grieving. Grand aunt who raised you, it's a time for grieving. So it could be a cousin that stepped in and took in that lead role that, brought the child up or was helping to take care of the child every day. The child saw that person, and, this is how our family is. And it could be, and we're talking about, again, it could be a blood relative. It could be a love relative. Love relative meaning that this could be a best long-term best friend of the family. They family been best friends with your family since who knows when. That kind of thing, But these are the type of things that we do to succeed, and we need to own it. We need to own the interdependence. It's not our natural way to have family units go off with mom, dad, and the 2 kids by themselves a million miles away from the rest of the family. That's not necessarily our normal way of being, and that's not how we progress necessarily. That's not necessarily our culture. That's not really in a people of color's culture, that kind of separation. Not just African Americans, but many different cultures. That unit, that family unit is what that larger unit is what makes it happen.
And we got to bring that back, because once again, in the show I did with Dr. Imani Perry, we talked about the decrease, and you know about this. In the older days, you had so many societies, right, in the Black community. Whether that's fraternities, sororities, and other kind of social clubs. You had the big old, huge, large church community. So all these other church ladies, that's your mama, these church ladies and these church guys, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, these other layers of togetherness.
Yes.
The community these days is more splintered, it's more fraction, it's more individualism. Right. So it's kind of removes those layers of community, right? The educators, they know your actual family. The educators, they're in the same fraternity with your daddy and your mom. They're in the same.
Exactly.
So you see this person 3 times in your life. You see them at Walmart, you see them at church on Sunday, and you see them over here. So at school, it's different when they're talking to you at school. You know them, though, and they know you.
Right. This is what my father always speaks about growing up in Miami, Florida. The fact that all the school teachers were in the community. They knew you. They knew your mama. They knew your daddy. They knew your aunts, your uncle. They may have been your aunt. They knew your family. They knew your family well. And so it wasn't anything for them to discipline you. it wasn't anything for them to discipline you, you know? They knew your family. They knew your family well. Which leads me to one of the other main characters in the story, Shay. She comes into the family. You know, she is definitely a love relative in the way that she comes into the family. And this is kind of like how Shay comes into the family kind of plays homage to my grandmother, you know, and how people came into and how children would come into our family, and that's it, you know. The fantastic element of it is that, you know, how Shay really does fold fully into this family when it's all said and done. But, you know, that's very, very much a strong element, a strong theme in the novel.
You know, in the old school community, it was almost an unsaid thing. Like my grandmother, for an example, our family, we always just took folks in. And these folks would stay forever. It was never a contract. It was never like understood, okay, you got 3 weeks. Until whenever this person's here, you get to play the food, we all together, and in the family functions, they're there. It's just understood.
It's
So for
just
us as children, we just knew, okay, so and so here. And then even before they're gone, before you know it, for whatever reason, and then somebody else comes in. It's just a continuous from children to older people. We always had people just they're part of our family.
So Michelle saying, I grew up having a large village. Everyone looked out for everyone. Okay. And see, that is power. That kind of a village, it has so much power behind it. It has so much power behind it. If you did something, they got you, and you got again when you got home. Absolutely. Absolutely. You got it from them, and then when they had called your mama or your dad before you got home, and you got it again. And so, you know, I tie in all of that family heritage into this fantastical setting.
That's right.
Because I wanted to show a real African American family living with this fantastical entity, this fantastical being, Enisi, but that it didn't stop them from being a traditional, you know, from being the Black American family that they were. You know,
right.
They still love to do all the things. They got the culture, they got the music, they like shopping, they like dancing, and, you know, having a good time. They got big Thanksgiving dinners and all this kind of stuff. You know, that goes right along with having this fantastical part of their life. It all folds in there together.
I asked you earlier a question about writing the author's bio. I want to ask you another author kind of question because a lot of my audience, they're writers and they're future writers. I love trying to be informative. Tell us about world building. I never asked anybody a question about world building before. I want to ask you about you build a whole world. It's an actual map. Even I'm gonna show the map.
Yes.
I love maps and books as well. I love maps.
Yes, I love maps too.
Get an actual map. You see it the tree. You see it.
Yeah, that's the valley.
That's a part.
Right? That's like the hangout, the valley, because there's so much more. But that's kind of like that's Enisi behind the house, and then he also grows himself in the valley down there where the waterfall is and all that kind of stuff. But for me, with world building, I would say this: you need to find a world that you're intrigued with, that you're gonna build from, because you want to be able to just write about it. So, you know, I was able to build my world off of the Plantae Kingdom, the real Plantae Kingdom, you know, plants and trees. Plants are trees. I mean, trees are plants. So start there, and then I could let my imagination build off of that world. And then you just write everything that comes to mind, because you could always go back and take away. So you just write everything that comes to mind, and, you know, you don't challenge your creativity. Put it down on the paper, write it, or type it. You know, we're typing nowadays. So let it come out. You know, and if I come to a point where I've written and I'm like, okay, doesn't seem like anything else is coming for right now, all I have to do is get up, go for a walk, do something else creative, and that will once again start releasing that creative energy through you, and you can come back to your story and have something completely resolved. And of course, me, when I go for a walk, I'm going out and I'm walking around trees and stuff, you know, walking through my garden or whatever. So that also just helps me to build my world. But that's what I would say for world building. Start with a world that you're interested in. If you're interested in outer space, start with that world and research it. Research the thing that's triggering your imagination to want to go beyond, what you see in reality. What's triggering it? Is it looking up at the stars? Is it when you flip through books, you can stare at the different planets forever trying to figure out what's going on those planets? What is triggering your imagination?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. So my next other question, you mentioned earlier in the show about like traditional publishing, traditional press, and they want certain points of view and things like that. So when it comes to your world building and this magical this that we have and our family communicates to each other, the traditional press doesn't always understand those elements and things. What was it like shopping this book to get published?
What was my what now about what was said again, Sean?
What was your challenge getting published with this book, selling this story? What was the pushback? Some of the pushback you had.
I did have pushback. I ended up self-publishing. I did for sure query a lot of agents. First of all, multiple point of views. That was a thing. They want it written in. They want to hear from one person's point of view, two person's point of view. That, and then just also didn't really take my story seriously. I was at that time, they were saying they wanted to hear authentic stories from our voices, but they have an idea of what they want, what they're interested in. It's usually trauma and drama. They're interested in that. So, they're not necessarily interested in, the point of view where I was coming from, the world that I was building. There's some stuff that happens, but it doesn't stay there. It doesn't stay there. That's not the core of the novel. And so I just, there was, I just didn't have any interest in the story. They weren't interested in the story that I was telling. Quite frankly, they were not interested in the story I was telling. And so, I knew I wanted my story to come out. And so I was like, I'm just going to have to self-publish. And self-publishing has really, really evolved over the years. And so I self-published. There's so much phenomenal stuff going on with self-publishing. And at the end of the day, you need to reach your readers. If you can reach your audience, that's the challenge, getting to your audience, because there's an audience out there that wants the story you're telling. And it's enough of them where you can be successful. It's enough. You have to figure out, the challenge is getting to your audience. And we have more tools than ever now to help do that. That's the biggest challenge. But I know for sure that there's an audience out there that loves, what I'm writing about.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. I love asking my guests on the show recently a lot more about that, because some of these books that sell as a grand slam, you think it's a no-brainer. They all have stories where, this editor told me this, and this publisher told me that. It's like, what? This is very interesting.
I had one agent that told me, she was kind enough to write back, and she says, you have something really special here. I'm just with a small press. I don't have time. I think she had time to do the editorial work she might have wanted to do with me. But she was like, keep going. And then I had another form letter that came back from an agent that was like, hey, if you're not with a critique group, you need to get with one. And there was this site called query.com, I think it's called. And people post their query letters and critique each other. And so the whole process of getting the novel ready to be queried to present to an agent for traditional publishing, that process is excellent in helping you to better shape your ideas. Because you write your query letter, and then because the query letter is going to force you to talk about your story, to nail your 300 pages down to a paragraph or two. So once you do that, you tell it, and in that shortened version, is what you've written, are you sure your story is telling and doing what you said it was doing in the query? Because if it's not, you need to go back in there and make sure it is, and then also having to come all the way down to that elevator pitch. All those steps help you to fine tune your story, because if you write a query letter because at some point you just got to let that query letter come out. You just kind of let it go what you think your story is all about after you've written, after you've written it, and you form your query letter and you read your query letter, and you might determine that I need to add a couple more elements back in the story to make sure it's hitting on these points that I'm claiming the story is about. So the process of getting your novel ready for pitching to agents, the process is really helpful to just strengthening your story. So do it. You need to do that process, and it also helps you prepare you to be ready to do interviews and speak with other people about your novel. It helps with that.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. You spoke on the plant life. You spoke on the culture and the family, and the Cherokee tradition, right? But you also have in your glossary a breakdown on the crystals and the stones and their attributes and what they do. Tell us about that element and that part of it, because some people, once again, they're scared of crystals, they're scared of stones, they swear to God they're going to just drop down dead. So tell them about the tradition of the crystals and the stones and what they mean.
But those are my people, like the crew, the tribe I hang with. We love crystals. We're always reading up and researching on crystals and how they impact your vibe, impact your energy. So as far as in my fantasy, there had to be the crystals, but I wanted it to be crystal work that was based on crystal work that people are doing in reality, so that if you like something in the novel, you can actually go get that crystal yourself. And so when Enisi does crystal work, when he's doing crystal work, it's the same attributes of the crystal. He's using his crystals in the same way that a person would use the crystals in our reality. And so in our everyday reality. So I wanted people to be able to be like, oh, if they became interested in the crystal work, they could actually go buy those crystals. That's why they're in the back of the book. You could actually go get those crystals and do that work on yourself and even learn more. I wanted to get people intrigued with crystals. So that's why I brought in the crystal element, because crystals are yet again these fantastical elements that are already in our lives. You have the forest, you go out, you walk in the woods, all that mysticism going on. You have crystals, all that stuff going on around. We have so much that, this stuff, this didn't drop out of thin air. There's a lot of history behind these things, and it's just getting back to nature. Getting back to it and seeing for yourself if some of these things are helpful and will improve your life. So, and then I have the Yoruba culture. When you talk about Vodun, you talk about
Voodoo,
Santeria. You talk about all those stemming from the Yoruba culture. And so Ife is definitely, that pulls from that. So that's something that someone becomes interested in, and I don't stay with it. Because it's not. This is a fantasy. It's just not all about that, but it's enough to trigger, enough to intrigue you to be like, "Is this real?"
That's right.
Okay. Let me go see if there's something there. She says, Michelle Brown says, I have crystals all through my house, and I wear them at times. I let people know that if you look in the Bible, they have them in their armor. And that's what I'm talking about. Okay.
Come on now. Yeah, just read. That's the power of reading and studying history. Our people always love to adorn ourselves. You look at the old images. Look at the old imagery. They were always adorned with rubies and gems and all of these things. That's what we always see. Our hip hop artists wear jewelry and chains and all that. But you go back to the old days, they had gold and they had things that they always did. That's what we do innately.
And not just for beauty, yes, but also for the attributes that these crystals and elements and minerals have, and that bring to your, that bring to us, bring to our culture, bring to our health. And so, I was like, I just wanted to bring that into the story, but I wanted to bring that in and also show that you can have all that going on and still be an intellect.
Yes. In fact, you should. In fact, you should.
In fact, you can have all that going on and still be like Kella is a brilliant scientist. She's a doctor, and she you can have all that going on in your world. You can have a whole fantastical living creature in your backyard and still go shopping at the mall.
Yes. See, you got to get away from that either or concept. It's not a
Right.
versus. It's together. It's all together, and we're all multifaceted beings, right? I can study and read all this stuff and still on Saturday night go and do what I do on Saturday night. Like I'm a full person, a full experience. It's not either or. We got to get away from it.
And that's how we're in full circle with my novel. You might find interesting, and I said I was going to stop telling people this story, but it just comes up naturally. Like, now I've had some people of different culture read the novel, and they are not interested. They love what's going on with Enisi in that fantastical part, but they are totally not interested in the family element. And I'm just like, for me, that's the whole point of it, to show that in many of our families, we have all kind of mystical stuff going on that you don't know about. Okay?
But
Our
you know
families
what?
practicing traditional African culture, practicing their indigenous people, their indigenous cultures, all the things that we brought into our lives, that we've learned about African culture that we're now incorporating in our lives. We developed the whole holiday Kwanzaa.
That's right.
It's on, but based on different ways of living and being, and empowering ourselves. So we have all this stuff going on. You can have all this going on in your life and still be 100% American.
Yes. But you know the beauty of having a layered story like that. I can think of other books that I read that kind of went back and forth through the time period. In certain books, I only like the part whenever they flash back. I like those chapters, and that's
Yes,
okay. That's fine
and that's
for a
fine.
person like the particular part of a story. It's still enjoy the book, enjoy the story. You know.
Yes, yeah, and I don't like, yeah, and so and I've had some people, that are just like they get into I have some people who aren't really into historical history, but it's not so much where it's not that much where it stops you from wanting to continue to see what's going on in the novel. And then of course, I love those who just really enjoy the entire who love all of that being encompassed in one novel. It's like, and I don't want to hold back. And I think that's something that as writers, particularly as African American writers, holding back on our creativity. We can tell a whole story with all that going on. So why should we hold back and not tell that story the way we can tell it? Because you feel it needs to be simplified for whatever reader. I'm one of my first reading group, my reading group that I'm with. When they read the novel, I was so nervous. I was like, is it too much? Is it too much? And they were like, what are you talking about? Is it too much? We're highly intelligent people here. We can handle all of this. We can handle more than one character. We can handle more than one thing going on. So I say that to say,
It said, don't doubt your audience.
if you
Don't
can
sleep on your audience.
say that again, Sean. I want
Don't
to.
they said don't doubt your audience. Don't sleep on your audience.
Please don't doubt your audience for
Don't doubt
sure.
your audience.
Don't underestimate your audience. That is something that I've learned very quickly. Like, my audience is here for it. And as a writer, that's freeing, because you just want to let your imagination just explode, and you want to do it, and you can. Your audience can handle it. You don't have to hold back. Here is someone's Abominable Book Girl says, the issue is people think religion trumps culture, so they overlook their culture as it's written in their religion. Overlooking it when the religion came up out the culture at the end of the day.
Yes. Come on now. Come on, boy. They're looking at it backwards. They're forgetting what came first. Before back to being the Griot, before we had the written traditions, everything passed down orally, everything was passed down through our rites and our rituals. But then this ritual, this is why we do it. And then they finally write down the ritual as if this is the thing. Like, no, this thing before it was written. It was just done. It was just orally said. Right?
Yes.
They're getting it backwards.
Yeah, and I think that the Bible is phenomenal. It's extraordinary.
Yeah.
And it's not this, you can't even say enough but we do have to remember that it was written. And once it has been written, that means somebody has some human form has some interpretation in it. Now, I do believe God works through us, and but you still have that. You have to take that into because you should take that into consideration. The person that those writing are no more significant to God than you are. And I know we have all our hierarchies, I hope I'm saying that word correctly, but we're all of us, each and every one of us is significant in God's point, in God's view. We're
Yes,
all
ma'am.
expressions of God. And so we're
Yes, ma'am.
all of our point of views are significant.
I want to come to a close on a more lighthearted kind of question, right?
Absolutely.
I love asking this kind of question. So we see a explosion going on right now. A lot of books are being turned into movies and TV series, things of that nature. So first of all, would you love this book to be a series? And if you do, would you imagine like who would be some of the characters you would try to cast if you could do that kind of
Absolutely. Like I wrote this book like that. I don't know if you noticed the book has a lot of dialogue in it. It's dialogue driven. And so I think all the time about who I would like who I would like to play what part. And so for sure, for Lilith, the matriarch of the family, the Lilith can be she can be Cree Summers, I think would be good as Lilith. As Lilith. I think her name is Michelle Michael. She played in Queen Sugar. She was one of the matriarchs in Queen Sugar, not the lead one, but she was one, and I liked her. And then there are so many new actors out here that could play Kella. So, and Rhea and Shay, there's so many great young actors. I really don't have anybody in particular in mind for them, but definitely for sure, I would love to see it as a series. I think it's visually stimulating.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
it has the stories that can definitely hold us, that could carry a series.
That's right. That's
It
right.
has
Because
the stories that
this
can
is a
hold.
literature. This is a literature show, and I do a lot of literature content. But I know a large part of the world are not readers, right? We're spoiled here. All of us love books, but a lot of the world not like that. So I always hope and wish that these series, the spark a person say, "Man, that was good. I'm about a book and see what the book about." I'm always hoping that.
And that's what
So
I did. I love the series Queen Sugar. Now, Queen Sugar I was already writing my story when Queen Sugar came out, but Queen Sugar, the series, the television series, it was doing exactly what I had been wanting. It was showing a different point of view of African American family. It was showing this very strong family with all these diversities within the family, which is what we have, and that regardless of the differences in the family, people still loved each other. And so that's what Queen Sugar kind of did, and I love that. And so of course I read the book. The book is quite different from the film. And I actually like what Ava DuVernay did with the film, but it's quite different from the film. The television series is quite different from the book, but it made me go out and buy and support that author. Absolutely. I wanted
let
to
me ask
know
you
where
that.
it originate from.
Let me ask you that trick question, right? Because we all know, well, some of us might know. Whenever author does agree, okay, that's cool to be for it to be a film, and you might have to like sign over your rights or whatever that look like legally wise, right? So if they take your story and it's greatly altered, like how do you feel about that, or do you not care about that? It's kind of tricky. It's a tricky
It's
dynamic.
good. I'm seeing interviews with writers who are who are allowed to be a part of the creative process. And so they are having a little bit of say, or not even some having a lot of say, so that it doesn't get too far away from what their story was about. And so I I'm somebody who would probably really get excited about seeing where somebody else would take. ideas that would evolve from my story and what it evolves with them. That is actually to me, that's a compliment, and so I look forward to something like that. But for sure, I would want to be involved in some kind of way just to make sure, that it's not taken too far away. But if you write your story strong enough, I think that, I can't remember the author, but his story was strong enough where they didn't really veer too far from it. He nailed it. Yeah. And so in writing my story, Enisi, the Bleu Realm, and it's dialogue driven, a lot of dialogue in it, that's my goal, to be like, it's already here. It's got a lot of script right here. You can pull it right from this book. I've got dialogue for you. You don't have to figure out that part. So, and we're in a time where people are doing things different. Things are being done differently. We're not accepting, creatives aren't accepting what they used to accept. They're expecting more, and we're out here doing things and making things happen. And I just believe it has its highs and it has its lows. But I think that creativity is meant to be more, is shared. Its creativity is a language of the planet that we all understand. And so I think it's meant for it to be more available, because it's what allows us to communicate with each other without even speaking the same language. So, the creative things have to be out there in a bigger way. That's where our world is going. Creativity has to be out there in a bigger way, because it's going to save us.
That's right. So I wanted to ask, because I've seen the flip side to that conversation, where an artist says that, some of us are real attached to our work. We're attached to it. It's like our baby, it's our brain baby. And you don't want your baby to be taken by somebody else to be altered or something like that. And they see it, they're like, man, that's not what I intended. That's not what I wrote. It's not how that character is to be portrayed, or the dialogue didn't happen like that. And they feel the kind of way about that. But you be to sign it over, so you can't. It is what it is at that point.
It is what it is. You have to take it. For me, your prayer game better be on point, and you have to take it slow. You can't rush into things. You have to take the time to make sure you got your legal in place, you got your advisors in place, and slow your roll. As much as you want to rush into something, you're going to have to slow your roll and make sure that you're not disappointed with the outcome. And so I think that, I'm hearing stories about people who are very satisfied with their outcomes. But you have to slow. I think that's something that that I think about a lot. And I'm like, you got to slow your roll. You cannot just rush and jump as much as you want to. You cannot just sign on the dotted line like that.
No, ma'am. But it's a real big promising time for all of us writers, anybody out there watching this, and you want to write a story, or you already have one. Be empowered, because we see all these streaming platforms, they want their own original content. So they got to turn and look toward the creators to get their own programming and get their own series. So it's really an uptick. We see 50 Cent here in Louisiana, in Shreveport, got his own studios now. You got Tyler Perry Studios. And there are other artists out there getting their own distribution. So our stories are being told our way.
And I feel encouraged by that. People are like, Bumper, we're doing it ourselves. I mean, people are filming their stories with their cell phones and putting it on TikTok. I mean, people are just like, I'm not waiting to be chosen anymore. I'm gonna do this damn thing. I'm not gonna wait to be chosen. I'm gonna do this, and
what a time to be alive.
I'm encouraged by that.
What a time to be alive. What a time. Yes, ma'am. Yes. Well, thank you very, very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Sean.
Beautiful book. Beautiful, wonderful book. It says a series. I'm waiting on part 2. If you need some beta readers, I'm more than sure my wonderful audience and myself, we would love to be a beta, give feedback and stuff like that. I always volunteer for those things.
And you can get, for our audience, you can get the book, Enisi, the Bleu Realm. Is sold on Amazon. And it's sold at my website, www.tracieangelagreene.com. So,
that's right.
It's there. It's ready for you.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed the episode. I enjoyed my
Me
time.
too, Sean. I really
Everybody
did.
out there watching, there'll be a lot more shows to come. Stay on the lookout for the next flyer and the next post. Thank y'all very much.
I'm looking forward to I'm looking forward to your next. I've been listening to this since being introduced to you. I'm listening to the podcast more and more. I love the interviews. I'm learning so much. You find the most interesting, informative people. You gotta, yeah. I'm learning so much.
Thank you very much for those kind words. It mean a lot to my heart. It's really tough to do this, so it's good to be encouraged. I appreciate that.
Oh my goodness, yes. Please keep doing it. I'm like, with Sean, he doing this every day. Whoop, 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 whoop. We just woo.
It feels like every day.
The knowledge is coming at you. It's ready for you. You can't say it's not there for you.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. It's there.
All right. Thank you, Sean.
I appreciate y'all. Thank y'all.
All righty. Bye-bye.